hard work in helping grow this company now in 3 markets, and we're launching 2 markets in the next few months. At Payfort, we all wanted to contribute to our ecosystem, and we felt that there's a big gap in the last few years, which is if it's a venture capital, if it's an investor, if it's a startup, they always have problems in sizing up the market that they're in. Nobody knows how much is e-commerce today in Egypt or in Jordan or in Lebanon. Nobody knows what it's going to be in 5 years from now. Nobody knows who's buying and what channels they're using to make purchases. What are the challenges on the merchant side? What are the challenges on the consumer side? So our super team has been working so hard in the last 6 months to bring this to light to you. And I'm very happy to tell you that we've launched stateofpayments.com less than a month ago, and so far we have over 10,000 visits organically on the site. And I invite you to visit it. So today there are different verticals. There's e-commerce, marketplace, there is travel, entertainment, and airlines. We're not going to go through all of that. We're just going to go through the e-commerce bit and also the demographics bit. Just to give you a background of how we've developed this, we've interviewed over 500 merchants. Some of them are ours and some of them are not ours. And we've also interviewed over 10,000 end consumers with the partnership with YouGov. So putting that, and of course a lot of the data that comes from us and a lot of one-on-one interviews with our big merchants in terms of validating the numbers and validating the challenges. So if we look at the Arab world in terms of e-commerce, in 2014 it was around $7 billion, and that's the breakdown. Of course, UAE is still holding the reign. However, Saudi Arabia and Egypt are one of the fastest growing markets in e-commerce, and we anticipate that number to reach $13.4 billion, and we'll start competing with airlines. So right now, airlines represent the biggest share in terms of online spend. We believe that e-commerce will take over or be equal to airlines by 2020. If we look at seasonality, and this is a 12-month running average, this is basically the seasonality of the transaction size, the value of the transaction. Of course, we all buy Christmas gifts to our loved ones in November and December, and also in terms of the transaction volume as well. So it's pretty apparent that things really start to happen in e-commerce in November and December, and no wonder we call it Black Friday, because usually companies go into the black in Thanksgiving in November. If we look at some of the factors that a lot of merchants are concerned about, which what we call the acceptance ratio, is basically how many people try to transact on your website and how many of them actually succeed with their transaction. E-commerce in the region at 74%. So yeah, 25% of customers are unable to complete the transaction, either because the transaction fails because of the credit card authentication through 3D Secure, non-sufficient funds, or declined by the issuer, because some issuers do not allow for certain transactions to take. Some of the cards don't actually work online. When we look at chargebacks, it's very minimal. However, refund is the highest in all the categories. Usually all the other categories are less than 1%. E-commerce represents 5%, and the major contribution to that is out of stock. So there is definitely a lot of work to be done for e-commerce sites while working with their supply chain, making sure that the product is there. Also, the longer the e-commerce site takes to deliver the product, the higher refund ratio would go up, because the customer would say, you know what, I'm just going to go down the street and buy this mobile phone. What we've also, part of the survey, we've asked companies what is the most important thing for them, and 34% said the transaction volume. So still, a lot of the e-commerce players are looking for more business. Yes, of course, they're also looking to optimize their acceptance ratio. They're concerned about the chargeback ratio, but the biggest driver was the transaction volume. And also, when we ask them what are their major challenges, a lot of them is that increased trust on the checkout page with end consumers. And we're in the process of developing a product which we hope we launch by the end of this year, which is called Verified by Payfort, that we believe will help build trust between the end consumer who's making the transaction and the merchant who is accepting that transaction. If we also look at where the customer comes from, where the conversion happens in terms of social media, of course, Facebook is still the winner. However, we've seen Instagram take a huge rise in 2014. A lot of it is coming from Saudi Arabia primarily and Kuwait, and it's becoming an ecosystem by itself. So yes, and if you talk about to any e-commerce merchant, and if they don't say the word Instagram, we know that they're really losing a lot of market share, because it's a rich media outlet that they can use to merchandise their product. And we've also asked the importance of alternative payment methods to the 500 participants in our survey, and they said it is extremely important to find an alternative method to credit cards, and of course to cash on delivery. I don't think cash on delivery is the enemy. I think returns from cash on delivery is the enemy, and that's why we try to solve the problem of refunds and returns that are coming because of cash on delivery. So how does alternative payment play a part in that, and more importantly, how does it play a part without creating any friction? If we look at installments, of how many people would like to pay with installments, it is less popular than alternative payments. However, it is happening. We've launched a product a few months ago called Pay Easy, and we've seen a huge uptake of customers actually spreading their payment over 3 months or 6 months or 9 months. We have banks participating from Saudi Arabia, from Egypt, from the UAE, and we're adding a few other countries. So on checkout, as a consumer, you can split the payment for 3 months or 6 months, which increases the purchasing power on checkout for the merchant. And we've seen with a few pilots that it really did increase the checkout purchasing power on checkout. Also, the marketing channels still social media and email marketing, and SEO is key. However, email marketing took a dip from last year. I think it was over 20%. So we're seeing email marketing becoming less effective with consumers unless the merchant is switching to a personalization. Rather than all of us getting the same newsletter, we would actually all get a specific newsletter that is tailored to us. Because I bought a Samsung phone and you bought an iPad, so it would get you, or it displays information for you that is relevant to the transaction or the history of your search that you've done. Also, some of the products categories, not in terms of transactions, but in terms of supply, because we understand that there's a supply and demand, so we wanted to examine the supply out there, and electronics and entertainment are the highest. However, that doesn't mean that the highest in conversion. Electronics is definitely highest in conversion by 60% market share, while entertainment is less than 3%. We believe there are 3 contributing factors for any e-commerce site to succeed today and in the future, which is how many of your channels are coming from mobile sales, how many are coming from credit cards, and how many of them are repeat buyers. So we've asked a lot of the merchants where are they in terms of that, and we've seen that there's a lot of room for improvement in order for that to happen, because as the panel said, mobile is, I think if you're not mobile first, it is a problem, because we're all at shopping in the mall, and we all want to compare prices. We want to see, can I get it quicker? Can I get it better? Is it is it available or not? So the consumer is doing the search on the go. So we believe that's the importance of mobile. Repeat buyers reflects the trust, reflects the continuity with the end consumer that you have. And of course, what are the biggest challenges of e-commerce sites? It's still the acquiring market share, so everybody's still in growth mode, and everybody wants to enhance how they acquire the customer and reduce the cost of acquiring customers. And the second component was delivery, 28%. So it is a major challenge today for e-commerce merchants. Also, the significant factor of clothing returns, because we see fashion, and yesterday Iyad was talking about the rise of fashion when it comes to delivery. So we looked at what are the contributing reasons for the return. 42% was the wrong size, which is understandable, and then followed by couldn't reach the buyer. So sometimes the courier company or the merchant is unable to reach the buyer to deliver the service or the product. Also, we've looked at the rise of subscription e-commerce fashion, such as Mr. Draper and all of that stuff. So we've seen a lot of those models come about. So we've asked, and everybody's actually welcoming e-commerce subscription from the industry. And also they're welcoming the offline retailer to come into that industry. So e-commerce players, they don't see a threat from the retailer. As a matter of fact, they see it as an advantage because it increases the supply online. So as a consumer, I can decide to make a purchase when I'm going online and say, you know what, I don't have to leave the house today. I can find a place to do that. Also, some of the biggest challenges still for the offline retailer when they're going online is maintaining the same level of service between offline and online stores. So how do I maintain that the product that is in the store, that I'm selling that product, who's going to actually literally go to the shelf and take the product off the shelf because someone actually purchased that. So that is the biggest concern for offline retailers when they're going online. And we've worked with a few big retailers such as Jumbo Electronics to develop an omni-commerce, so you can actually buy the product online and pick it up offline, which is the click and collect model, but also how they integrate their ERP, their backend system, into their shopping cart and also their offline stores. We've also looked at omni-commerce, as I mentioned. So, online shopping retailers, they said 50% of them said that yes, omni-channel will take 50%, and 100% of offline retailers want to engage in omni-commerce. And I think there's a huge opportunity for e-commerce providers and shopping cart providers and technology providers to come into that space, because a lot of the retailers, they don't really how to start, or where to start, and how to tie the system to that system. And also, we've looked at the major factors for returns from cash on delivery. Aramex talked about that yesterday. We dived deeper to understand what are the reasons behind those returns, and 49% that the courier company took too much time to deliver the product. Again, it could be the merchant that the product was not ready, also was there, and also the customer is not serious. So we see that when it comes to cash on delivery, that there is a disruption that is required to fix that problem, which we're working on right now with Verified by Payfort. And we also had a lot of industry experts. Two of them was on the panel yesterday, Ronaldo Shahwar and Dubai Omar. And Ronaldo said mobile first. He believes that by the end of this year, 60 or 70% of their volume will be at mobile and will overtake web. And Omar talked about the challenges facing cross-border trade. Also, Nasser from Khudarji talked about how you need to own your value chain and your supply chain in order to make sure you deliver the product on time, especially if it's a perishable good. And Teal Garrett talked about how you can optimize your CRM in order to get that customer back to you. When we go through the demographics, again, we look at the population, who's in the population. So again, Egypt at 82 million. In terms of penetration, 40 million internet subscribers in Egypt. UAE is 8.2 million. When we look at how many people are using social networks to come to the e-commerce website, Facebook in the Arab world, in Emirates, in the UAE is the clear winner, and LinkedIn is pretty high as well at 46%. When you look at other markets like Saudi Arabia, you see Instagram taking a huge jump because of adoption of Instagram in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait as well. Egypt, obviously Facebook is a huge winner, followed by Twitter. And Kuwait, very similar to Saudi Arabia. We see Instagram also becoming a driver of transactions. Lebanon. So we have few countries. When we look at online buyers, we've seen an increase from 30 million buyers to 40 million buyers in less than 18 months. And this is the breakdown of buyers in those 6 markets, as well as by gender. So again, a lot of that we've done in order to help the startup build their business case, build their business plan. When they're going talking to VCs and investors, they can really quantify that number in terms, as opposed to coming out with a number from thin air. When we looked at the age groups, obviously the between 26 and 35 is the number one. However, we've also seen that from 18 to 25 is the fastest growing, because last year was not as big, and we believe that next year this number would reach 35%, because they're becoming more banked, they're becoming, they're making more money, so they're spending more money online. And some of the online buying trends, tickets are at 64%, so 64% of people transacting online in the UAE are buying airline tickets, followed by hotel reservations and consumer electronics. Similarly, airline goes a little lower in Saudi Arabia, and consumer electronics goes a bit higher. Of course, all that information is on stateofpayments.com, and I invite you to visit that as well. Interesting in Egypt that 39% or 29% are saying they're not still buying online, and also when you look at Jordan, for example, 45% are saying they're not buying online yet. So we do see a lot of the challenges when we talk to people on the ground. Actually, when we did the reported, I was actually validated by that. So we felt that was very important for companies to understand every single country that they're transacting in and how they can go after that market. When we look at payment methods, we are a cash society, 70% in the UAE alone. Yes. 70% in the UAE alone is offline, is actually spent through cash, and it's represented that also online. But we've seen the rise of other payment methods such as Kuwait at 20%, which is KNet. Of course, income levels have a contributing factor, so I'll also invite you to go through this. They're booting me off the stage, so I'm gonna go quickly through this. And again, wanted to thank the team that worked on the report, and thank you very much for your thoughtful participation.